The salty air hit me first, a familiar embrace as I stepped onto the deck of the USS Orion. I'd served on destroyers, cruisers, and even a carrier, but this was different. This was my first executive officer position, and frankly, I was nervous. Not about the job, mind you. I was good at my job. It was the crew. My last posting was a quiet research vessel, mostly scientists and a skeleton crew. The Orion was a beast, a destroyer with a reputation for being a tight-knit, boisterous family. And they had a reputation for being, well, a bit old school when it came to command. I was inspecting the forward missile tubes when the first guffaw reached me. I turned, and there they were, a cluster of young, strapping sailors, pointing and chuckling. I tried to ignore it, telling myself it was just some innocent joke. Then I heard it, clear as day, "Look at her. Think she can even lift a wrench?" My jaw tightened. I was a woman in a man's world, a reality I'd faced since day one at the academy. But I'd earned my stripes, every single one. I'd outrun, outshot, and outsmarted men twice my size. I'd held my own in simulations and real-life emergencies. Yet, here I was, still having to prove myself before I'd even officially stepped foot on the bridge. The next few days were a blur of condescending smiles and thinly veiled challenges. Every order I gave seemed to be met with an eye roll or a slow, deliberate movement. If I asked a question, I'd get a simplistic answer, as if I couldn't grasp anything more complex. It was infuriating. I remember one afternoon, walking past the mess hall, I overheard a group of them betting on how long I'd last. That night, I barely slept. Doubt, a venomous snake, began to coil in my stomach. Maybe they were right. Maybe I wasn't tough enough for a destroyer. Maybe I didn't belong here. Then came Admiral Hayes's inspection. He was a legend, a man who'd seen more action than most history books. His presence alone sent ripples of fear and respect through the crew. I stood ramrod straight on the deck, trying to project an air of calm I didn't feel, as he made his way through the ship, his sharp eyes missing nothing. He stopped in the engine room, a place I'd spent countless hours learning, getting my hands dirty, understanding every single bolt and pipe. He asked a technical question about the new propulsion system, a complex issue that even some of the senior engineers were still grappling with. Before I could answer, a young ensign, one of the main instigators of the jokes, piped up with a half-baked explanation, full of bravado but lacking any real understanding. The Admiral listened patiently, a slight frown on his face. Then he turned to me. "Executive officer, your thoughts?" I took a deep breath. This was it. This was my chance. I launched into a detailed explanation, citing specific data, pointing out potential flaws the ensign had missed, and offering solutions. I spoke with the authority and knowledge I had earned. The Admiral's frown slowly melted away, replaced by a subtle nod of approval. He continued his inspection, moving towards the bridge. As we walked, I could feel the eyes of the crew on me. The laughter had died down, replaced by a tense silence. We reached the bridge, and the Admiral stood before the entire senior staff and a good portion of the crew who had gathered for the formal address. He cleared his throat, his voice booming across the silence. He spoke of the Orion's proud history, of duty, and of leadership. And then, he looked directly at the laughing bunch, his gaze like steel. "I've heard some unfortunate chatter during my visit," he began, his voice dropping slightly, becoming more dangerous. "Whispers about competence, about who belongs and who doesn't." The air thickened. I felt a pang of dread, wondering if my struggles had been more apparent than I'd thought. Then, he turned, his eyes sweeping across the entire crew, finally settling on me. And with a voice that cut through the silence like a knife, he declared, "Let me be clear. Lieutenant Commander Davies is not just any officer. She is your executive officer. She is an exemplary leader, with a mind as sharp as any I've seen. And starting today, she is your commanding officer." A collective gasp went through the crowd. My heart stopped. Commanding officer? I hadn't known. They hadn't told me. The Admiral's gaze intensified as he looked at the stunned faces. He paused, letting the words sink in. "They laughed," he said, his voice now laced with an almost chilling authority, "until the Admiral said, 'She's your commanding officer.'" The silence that followed was deafening. The smiling faces had gone pale. The confident grins had vanished. The young ensign who had offered the shoddy explanation in the engine room looked like he'd seen a ghost. The weight of his words hung in the air, a silent judgment on their disrespect. From that day on, things changed. The laughter stopped. The condescending looks were replaced by respect, sometimes still a little hesitant, but respect nonetheless. I was still Lieutenant Commander Davies, but now, I was also the commander. And they knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that I had earned it. I had proven myself, not just to the Admiral, but to myself, and finally, to the crew of the USS Orion. I knew it was a moment I would never forget. A moment that would forever shape the kind of leader I would be.